The first time I heard about the house on Weaver's Bend, I was 10. My cousin Tommy said it ate people. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because that's what you do when someone says something that feels too true. He pointed through the trees where the shape of the house rose between the mist and maples, just beyond the cornfields where Old Man Carrow used to shoot deer from his porch. "It doesn't let them go," he whispered. By then, 4 families had lived in that house. 3 had moved. 1 disappeared. But none of that mattered until 30 years later, when I had to go back. My name is Daniel Mercer. I'm a regional property inspector based out of Allegheny County. I deal with foreclosures, structural hazard reports, and repo maintenance. If a house sits too long, I'm the guy who walks through it with a checklist and a flashlight. I hadn't been back to Ashcroft in 27 years. Not since my mother moved us out the day after Tommy disappeared. So when the file came in, it hit me hard. Foreclosure inspection request, property 76329, address 141 Weaver's Bendard, Ashcroft, PA. For a moment I thought it was a prank. Then I remembered. Nobody knew. Nobody at the office had ever heard of Tommy or the stories. All they saw was another rural foreclosure, untouched for a decade. I shouldn't have taken the job, but I did. Ashcroft hadn't changed. Still quiet, still grey. Still full of that hollow silence you only get in towns that remember too much. I checked into the Motel Riverstone, room 5. Peeling walls, a rotary phone, and that smell of mildew that seeps into your skin no matter how long you shower. The clerk, a man in his 70s with nicotine fingers and a Vietnam cap, slid the key across the counter without looking up. "You here for the Weaver place?" he asked. I froze. "Just an inspection," I replied. He nodded slowly. Like that explained everything. "Don't stay past sundown," he said, then turned away. The house was exactly as I remembered. 3 stories, gabled roof, black shutters hanging crooked, ivy grown over the entire east side like veins. The front door sagged inward slightly, as if the house were breathing. It hadn't been touched in years. No squatters, no copper stolen. Even the windows were intact, save for one on the 2nd floor that looked like it had been punched out from the inside. I took my flashlight, clipboard and camera and stepped onto the porch. The moment my foot touched the wood, the wind died. No birds, no leaves rustling, just silence. I tried the knob. It turned without resistance. The door opened on its own. The inside smelled like wet plaster and rust. The foyer opened into a wide staircase, the kind you'd expect in a southern mansion. To the left, a sitting room. To the right, what might have been a study. Everything was covered in dust and sheets. But the weirdest thing? It was clean. No animal droppings, no signs of decay or mold, just disuse. I started recording notes on my phone. Interior intact, no major structural damage noted on entry. Electrical likely offline, plumbing unknown. Front door unlatched but secure. Temperature inside unusually cool. I paused. The floor under my feet didn't creak. Old wood should groan. This was too still. In the dining room I found the only object not covered in a sheet. A grandfather clock, still ticking. I stared at it for a long moment. No power in the house, no battery backup. It shouldn't have worked. The time read 3:12 p.m. I checked my watch. 3:12 p.m. My phone? Same. I wrote it off as coincidence and moved to the kitchen. But just before I left the room, the clock chimed once. Dong. I turned. The hands hadn't moved. The kitchen was lined with 1950s cabinetry and yellowing tiles. An ancient refrigerator leaned against the far wall like a drunk. On the counter was a glass of water, still half full. No dust, no film, fresh. I touched it, cold. Something creaked above me. I froze. Another creak, slow, deliberate. Footsteps, coming from the 3rd floor. I stared up at the ceiling. Then the sound stopped. I backed out of the kitchen slowly, flashlight raised. When I stepped back into the hallway, the door to the basement was open. I hadn't opened it. I've walked through hundreds of basements. This one felt different. Not because it was damp or dark, but because it wasn't. It was dry, almost sterile. The cement was smooth, freshly swept, no cobwebs, like someone had cleaned it recently. Against the far wall was a wooden chair, and on that chair, a tape recorder, cassette. Early 90s model, dust-free. It clicked on the moment I stepped closer. "If you're hearing this, you're in the house. If you're still there after dark, it already knows your name. Don't go upstairs. Don't answer if it knocks. Don't trust the mirrors." I backed away. The recorder stopped. The lights flickered, for the first time even though the power was dead. I ran up the stairs. Halfway up the main staircase, I passed the mirror. I didn't remember it from childhood. But there it was. An antique oval, framed in black iron. The glass was warped, like water frozen mid-ripple. I looked into it, and it looked back. Not my reflection. A different version of me. Same face, same clothes. But the eyes were wrong, too wide, too knowing. He smiled. I blinked, and he was gone. The mirror showed only me again, pale, sweating. Then I noticed there was no mirror on the wall, just wallpaper. The mirror was only in the reflection. I left the house. I had to. I didn't close the front door. I didn't care. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely start the car. When I finally got back to the motel, I threw the recorder on the bed and locked the door. I thought I was safe. Then the phone rang. Not my cell. The rotary motel phone. I picked it up. Silence. Then a whisper. "Why did you leave?" I dropped the receiver. There was a knock at the door. Once, twice, 3 times. I didn't open it. It kept knocking until 3:12 a.m. Then it stopped. I couldn't sleep. I kept seeing the reflection. I told myself it was stress, memory, suggestion, maybe even mold spores. Hallucinations aren't uncommon in condemned homes. But then I opened the glove box to look for Tylenol and found a leather ledger. Old, bound in cracked black hide. It hadn't been there before. On the first page, in ink that shimmered slightly, this is how it begins. Then entries, hundreds, names, dates, some crossed out, some smeared in what looked like rust or dried blood. And every few pages, a reflection, a sketch of the mirror. Underneath it, scrawled in a shaky hand, it watches from the glass until it finds a name. I flipped to the last page. There, under a blank line, it read, Daniel Mercer, October 14th, 2023. I didn't sleep. By morning, the knock at the door still echoed in my bones. I sat on the edge of the bed, the black ledger open in my lap, staring at the last entry, my name, Daniel Mercer. October 14th, 2023. I ran my fingers across the page, hoping it was a prank. But the ink was fresh. The smell, something between iron and mold, clung to the fibers. It was real, and it knew who I was. I flipped through the earlier pages. The oldest entry read, Eleanor Finch, September the 22nd, 1901. She answered the mirror. They found her body nailed to the attic wall, eyes removed, mouth stitched shut. Another, Joseph W. Creel, January 3rd, 1932. He thought he could record it. All they found was his microphone, playing back a sound like breathing. His lungs were gone. I closed the book. My breath caught in my throat. It had been happening for over a century. I drove to the Ashcroft County Library, hoping to find some historical context, anything to rationalize what I'd seen. The librarian, an older woman named Gwen with half-moon glasses and stiff posture, raised an eyebrow when I mentioned 141 Weaver's Bend. "You're the second one this month asking about that place," she said, thumbing through an index. "Second? Local podcaster. Young guy. Had a drone and a tape recorder. Stayed 3 days, then disappeared. When?" She tilted her glasses. 10 days ago. I felt cold. I asked for property records. She retrieved 3 dusty boxes labelled Weaver. Inside, news clippings, death records, property transfers. Each decade told the same story. Sudden disappearances, structural complaints, mysterious illnesses. Then I found a black and white photo, a boy, age 10. Big eyes. Crooked smile. Thomas Mercer, reported missing October 15, 1993. Tommy. I leaned back, heart pounding. I hadn't known the exact date he vanished. It was exactly 30 years ago today. I didn't want to go back, but I had to. There was a sick magnetism to the house, like something pulling behind your ribs. This time, I wore a GoPro on my chest and carried a field recorder. I wanted evidence, proof. The moment I stepped onto the porch, the air changed again. Static clung to my skin and the silence returned. That unnatural hush. I entered through the kitchen door. The glass of water was still on the counter, untouched. The upstairs hallway was lined with doors, 4 in total, all shut. The wallpaper had peeled into long yellow tongues. The air was heavier here, harder to breathe. I tried the first door on the left, a child's bedroom. Faded wallpaper of carousel horses, a mobile still hanging unmoving though the window was cracked. On the floor sat a box of cassette tapes, labelled in crayon, Tommy, for when it gets loud. I knelt, heart hammering. 1 tape was still in the player. I pressed play. Static. Then a boy's voice. "Sometimes the mirror talks when it's dark. It says my name. It sounds like me but wrong. If I don't look at it, It screams. I think it wants to be me. The tape cut off, abrupt. A sudden sound behind me made me whirl around. The mirror. There it was again, freestanding in the corner. Oval, warped glass. My reflection stared back. But this time it moved differently. A half-second delay, like a puppet learning to imitate. Then it blinked. And I didn't. In the room across the hall, I found a leather-bound journal under a loose floorboard, written by Claire Redmond, dated 1978. We moved in June 5th. By July, the mirrors started changing. Our son wouldn't sleep. He said something crawled out of the glass at night and stood in the doorway. We tried covering them. It didn't matter. They showed up anyway. Reflections that weren't real. It watches us. The final entry. David tried to burn the mirror. The fire went out. He's gone now. I don't know where the walls end anymore. I see rooms that shouldn't be there. I see myself doing things I haven't done yet. I slammed the journal shut. Then I heard it. Scratching. From inside the walls. I shouldn't have gone up, but something was calling me. Low, vibrating beneath the floorboards, humming in my chest. The stairs groaned under my weight for the first time, as if resisting me. The light grew dimmer the higher I climbed. The third floor was unfinished. Exposed beams, dust-choked air. At the end of the hall, a door. Small, wooden, black iron handle. I opened it. Inside, a single room, walls lined with mirrors, hundreds of them. Different shapes, sizes, frames, some cracked, some pristine. None showing my reflection. Instead, they showed other people, some crying, some screaming silently. One looked like a boy I once knew. Tommy. He mouthed something. Over and over. I leaned close. Help me. Behind me, the door slammed shut. I ran to the door. Locked. Pounded on it. Nothing. The mirrors began to flicker, images flashing like strobes. Different lives, different deaths. One showed me, hanging by a noose from the stairwell. Another showed me buried in the backyard. Another drowning in the bathtub. They were possibilities. The house wasn't haunted, it was hungry, feeding on versions of reality, on choices. It showed you how you'd die until you picked the right one. And then it made it happen. One mirror cracked. Just a hairline fracture, but it shimmered. I ran to it, desperate. Threw the journal at the glass, it shattered, and light poured out, blinding. White. I felt the room twist. The air sucked from my lungs, and then silence. When I opened my eyes, I was in the front yard. The house loomed behind me, still and breathless. The windows were black. In my hand, the tape recorder. Still running. I fled Ashcroft, filed the inspection report with a single line. Uninhabitable. Recommend demolition. But I knew no one would touch it. The tape, I sent it to a colleague in Boston. She went missing a week later. The ledger, I tried to burn it. It wouldn't catch. Instead, it opened to a fresh page. Do you see it now? Below that, next, someone else's name. And below that, your name. The night crept in like a tide of ink. I sat cross-legged on the floor of my motel room, every light on, the curtains drawn tight. The ledger sat on the bed, closed. But I could feel it, like a presence pressing against the air itself, making the light buzz louder than it should. I had tried to forget, tried to throw it out, burn it, leave it behind. But the moment I stepped outside without it, my vision blurred, my knees went weak, and I vomited. The pain was like fire behind my eyes until I turned around and saw the black book sitting neatly at the door of the motel, waiting, like a dog that knew its master. I received a call that morning from a number I didn't recognize, a woman's voice, frantic, whispering. You don't know me. I listened to the tape. You need to leave Ashcroft. There's something inside the house. It watches, yes, but it listens too. It learns you. You read from the book, didn't you? Whatever you do, don't write in it. I froze. Who is this? You're going to be pulled in. That's how it grows, through witnesses. Then the line went dead. I called back. Number out of service. When I played the voicemail again, her voice was different. It was mine. I drove back to the Ashcroft County Records Office, reluctantly. There had to be a point of origin. Someone who started this. A helpful clerk named Remy dug through archived court documents from the late 1800s. A name surfaced again and again. Reverend Elias Harrow. Preacher. Property owner. Psychiatric reformer. He purchased the land where the house stood in 1896, opened it as a temporary care home for mentally ill children. The house was originally a 3-story Victorian known as the Harrow Retreat, and then records stop in 1901. Newspaper clippings spoke of a tragedy and confiscated documents. Remy pulled a single article, Room of Mirrors. the same one I stood in. A visit to the Ashcroft Historical Society paid off. I bribed the curator to let me see the private archives. In a fireproof case was a leather-bound book, dusty but intact. Harrow's journal. I see them. The children. They speak in tongues, not theirs. Their eyes go blank and they draw symbols on the walls. Something comes through the glass. The mirror shows not what is, but what wants to be. The house is not a place. It is a veil. The ledger was given to me in dream. I wrote their names in it and they were taken. It was mercy, or so I thought. But it writes now without my hand. I locked the journal in my glove compartment. I locked the ledger in the trunk. I parked a mile from the house. Didn't matter. When I returned to the motel, both books were sitting on my bed, side by side, open. Harrow's journal read, "He returns." The new scribe, "The house breathes again." And the ledger, "Daniel Mercer, returned." My hands shook, but I couldn't stop reading. He will walk the stairs on the blood date. He will find the door with no frame. He will knock 3 times, and it will answer. I slammed it shut. Something knocked on the motel room mirror. 3 times. Back at the house the next night, against all sanity, I searched the 3rd floor again. The mirrors were different, shifting, showing new images. A woman this time, holding a child, then gone. Then one mirror melted, dripping black fluid that sizzled on the floor. Behind it door, no frame, just a black void shaped like an arch. Against every instinct in my body I knocked. Once, twice, 3 times. The silence that followed was not empty, it was aware. The space beyond opened like a wound. The door didn't lead to a room, it led to a mirror of the house, but not abandoned. Not empty, lit by gas lamps, echoes of children's laughter, shadows moving just out of reach. I passed through the foyer and into a room lined with portraits. All eyes followed me. In the dining room sat a long table, dustless, plates arranged perfectly, and at the head, Elias Harrow, alive, staring at me. "Mr. Mercer," he said without moving his lips. I stepped back. "You've come far to see truth." He raised a black pen and opened a second ledger. "What is this place?" I whispered. "The marrow of belief," Harrow replied. "This is where choices become consequences, where the mind's reflection becomes real." "Why me?" "Because you looked. Write one name and you may leave. Choose someone else. Anyone. The book will take them." I shook my head. "I won't. Then the book will choose for you." Behind him, the room rippled. The portraits blinked. The plates on the table filled with blood. You cannot unsee the mirror. I turned and ran. I don't remember how I got out, only that I woke up in the motel bathtub, cold, shivering, the faucet still dripping. Both books beside me. I burned Harrow's journal in the sink, watched it turn to ash. But the ledger, it didn't even smoke. It's been 3 weeks. I've fled Ashcroft, but the name still haunts me. Daniel Mercer. Written over and over in dreams, in condensation on the mirror, in the frost of my windshield. Everywhere I go, I hear 3 knocks. Last night, I looked into the bathroom mirror, and my reflection smiled. But I didn't. 3 days after I left Ashcroft, I received a USB drive in the mail. No return address, just a post-it note. He recorded everything. Listen with the lights off. I recognized the voice on the files immediately. Matt Dorian, the true crime podcaster who vanished 6 months ago. Matt had been covering haunted disappearances around the Midwest. His last episode centered on the Harrow house. Nobody ever heard from him again. Okay, I'm about 20 minutes out from Ashcroft. Weather's grey, sky's the colour of dishwater, fits the mood. According to my research, the house has been abandoned since the 1980s. Technically condemned, but somehow it's still standing. Locals avoid it, treat it like a leper colony. No urban explorers, no ghost hunting YouTubers. It's like the place pushes people away. I've got my GoPros, thermal cam, EMF scanner, the works. If I go missing, remember it started here. Wind howls. I'm inside. Place smells like wet ash and copper. Walls are still covered in those weird dark stains. Some look like melted shadows. Found a room with a busted crib and a mobile hanging above it. The mobile is moving, I didn't touch it. Okay, something just whispered my name. Swear to God it said Matthew, clear as day. I don't think I'm alone here. Jesus, I just found the mirror room. This is it. The one from the old police photos. They're not mirrors anymore. They're windows. I mean, they show things that aren't real, not just reflections. One showed me standing behind myself. Another showed my old bedroom back home. Something's wrong with the air here. It's thick, heavy, like breathing in someone else's breath. Wait, one mirror just turned black. There's a shape, someone's inside it. This one was different, no intro, no commentary, just the sound of breathing. Slow, uneven. Then a voice, not Matt's. He looked, he listened. He was written, a pen scratching. Matt's voice weak. I didn't write anything. I didn't choose. A second voice, but you saw, and so it chooses you. A door creaking, something dragging. Then 3 slow, hollow knocks and the recording ends. The local sheriff's department never found Matt, but they did find his rental car outside Ashcroft, doors open, hazard lights blinking. His camera was recovered from the back seat. The final frame was still. A single image. Matt standing in front of a mirror, wide-eyed, mouth open mid-scream, but his reflection wasn't matching. It smiled. I haven't slept in 2 days. Every time I close my eyes, I hear Matt whispering to me, "You're next." It's not paranoia anymore. My bathroom mirror fogs every night, even when no one's used hot water. Symbols appear in the condensation, written from the inside. I boarded it up, tried to cover every reflective surface. Still, I see her. That woman with the child from the mirror house. She watches from across the street. Even when I move to a new city, she's there. Desperate, I contacted the last living relative of Elias Harrow I could find, Judith Merrow, age 89. A retired history teacher. Lived alone in Colorado. She agreed to speak. Said she'd tell me what no one else would. I flew out. She opened the door before I knocked. "You brought the ledger, didn't you?" she said. I froze. How did you? She waved it off. "We're all part of it now, blood or not. Come in, Daniel." She served tea. Didn't drink hers. Judith spoke without emotion. Elias wasn't just a preacher. He was a theologist obsessed with the divide between consciousness and God. Thought mirrors were liminal gateways, places where thoughts bled into reality. He used the children to test his theory. He called it reflective indoctrination. Had them stare into the mirrors for hours while he read scripture in reverse. Eventually, they started drawing the symbols, speaking in other voices. One boy, Samuel, wrote an entire language in ash across the floor. After Harrow's death, the house became a convergence point, a thin place. The ledger was his anchor, but once it started writing back, he lost control. Judith continued. "It's not a book, it's a contract. Each name entered feeds the house. It gives it identity, story, presence. If your name appears in it, you belong to the reflection. And if you write another, you gain a day. Just one." She opened a drawer and placed something on the table. Another black ledger. "I stole this from the house in 1952, she said. "It followed me for decades. Take it," she said. "Add a name, or wait." "What happens if I wait?" "You forget yourself. One morning you'll look in the mirror and your face won't come back." I ran. I tried burning my copy again. This time I doused it in gasoline, lit it in the woods. It didn't burn. It didn't even smudge. This morning, the front page of the paper read, "Woman found dead in Ashcroft. Local historian Judith Merrow passes in sleep. Ledger found beside body." And now there are 2 ledgers on my kitchen table. November 2nd, only one day. I didn't sleep. The ledgers sat side by side on my table like 2 caskets waiting to be filled. No breeze in the room, yet the pages fluttered every few minutes as if restless. I didn't open them, didn't dare. Instead I paced, watched the windows, jumped at my own reflection. I called Mira, my ex. We hadn't spoken in months, but I needed to hear a voice that wasn't my own. She answered, tired. "Daniel, is everything okay?" Her voice cracked something in me. I told her everything. The mirrors, the names, the ledger, Matt, Judith, silence. Then, "You're scaring me? Are you using again?" I almost laughed. The idea that this was just a relapse would have been comforting. "No," I said, "but something's coming for me." A pause. Then she whispered, "I know." "What?" I sat up. "I've seen her too. We met at a diner halfway between our cities. Mira looked like she hadn't slept in days. Dark circles, jittery hands. She clutched a necklace with a shard of mirror on it, cracked, worn down smooth. "I found it in a thrift shop last year," she said. "Didn't know what it was, thought it was pretty. But since then, strange things." She said the reflections in her bathroom moved on their own. Photos on her phone would change, expressions subtly altered, eyes looking in the wrong direction. Then one day, she said, I woke up to find a word scratched into the fogged mirror. Daniel. I didn't know whether to be terrified or grateful. She leaned in, whispering, It's like the house is leaking, through people, through things. It's not just in Ashcroft anymore. She took my hands. We need to go back. We arrived before sunset. The sky was that orange-blue haze that always feels wrong, like the light isn't working properly. The house loomed ahead, same as before, but this time it was breathing. The boards shifted with slow, sucking creaks. The windows pulsed faintly, fogging and clearing as if exhaling. We stepped inside. My phone screen flickered off immediately. No service, no time, only echoes. We returned to the mirror room, but now it had changed. The mirrors were gone, or rather they weren't on the walls anymore. They hung in the air, floating, spinning slowly. Each showed something different. Mira stood before one. It showed her childhood home. Then her mother's face, smiling, warm. Then the same face, split open and laughing. She recoiled. "I can't," she stammered. Then from behind us a sound scratching. We turned. The wall had begun to shift. A hand, black, elongated, was carving names into the plaster. Daniel, Mira, Matt, Judith, Elias, Samuel, more. The hand paused and scratched a new name. Riley. I froze. My little sister. A voice, soft, syrupy, like someone whispering inside a seashell, filled the room. One name in, one day out. It echoed through the hall, not in sound, but in our bones. Mira whispered, "They want you to write someone. Trade them." I shook my head. No way. But then I saw it. A third ledger, floating before me. Open. Blank. A pen resting across it. The voice returned. "You choose or you lose." A mirror rose in front of me. Unlike the others, it didn't show alternate realities or warped horrors. It showed Riley, now. She was brushing her teeth in a college dorm, laughing with a friend, completely unaware. And then, behind her reflection, a figure emerged. Black eyes, dripping, pale limbs. She looked up, paused, turned, nothing there. But in the mirror, it still watched. The voice returned. "She is on the page, unless..." I dropped the pen. "I won't do it." Mira screamed. She was being pulled backward into one of the mirrors. Her legs flailed, her hands clawed the air. "Mira!" I grabbed her arms, pulled with everything I had. But she was smiling, not in pain, in peace. "I remember now," she said. "I was here before. I was one of them." Her eyes turned black and she whispered, "We write back." Then she vanished into the glass. I ran, through collapsing hallways, twisting corridors. The house was alive, rearranging itself, laughing through the floorboards. At the front door I saw it, my reflection, waiting, smiling. But it didn't move as I did. It raised a hand I hadn't, held up a new ledger, and wrote something. I felt a sudden, sharp pain across my chest. Looked down. 3 letters carved into my skin. Yes, I woke in my apartment. The ledgers were gone. My phone worked again. The world was normal. Except, every time I blink, I see glimpses of mirrors where there are none. In shadows. In glass. And last night, Riley called me. She said she had a dream where I was standing at the foot of her bed. She said I was writing something in the air, and smiling. I don't know if any of this will reach anyone. But I've learned this. It's not about ghosts. It's not about curses. It's about the story. It keeps writing itself, through people, through fear. And once you read your name, you belong to it. I hadn't left my apartment for 3 days. Every screen flickered with static when I approached. My laptop, the TV, even my smartwatch. At first I blamed interference, Wi-Fi problems or old wiring, but deep down I knew what it was. The story hadn't stopped. It was still writing. Every time I heard a name on TV, news anchors, podcasts, TikToks, I tensed up. I waited for the ledger to echo back in my head, but there was no more ledger, not physically. Now it was in me. I dreamed in pages. Long, yellowed parchment scrolling endlessly as names scrawled themselves across my vision. Most I didn't recognize, but a few, I knew them. Matt, Mira, Riley, and then new ones. Cody Nichols, Angela Weaver, none I'd ever met. But their names stuck. A padded envelope arrived. No return address, just my name written in all caps. Inside, a VHS tape. I don't own a VHS player. Who does anymore? But there's a pawn shop near Ashcroft that sells all sorts of obsolete tech. I drove out that night. The fog was thick, like a sea of ash rolling across the road. I didn't realize until I parked that the town sign now said, "Ashcroft, we're always writing you in." I blinked and it was gone. Just said, "Welcome to Ashcroft." But I saw it. I borrowed an old TV and VCR from the shop owner, said I was researching local history. He chuckled and said, "History never leaves Ashcroft." I waited until dark to watch the tape. It opened with footage from a camcorder, time-stamped June 7th, 2002. A teenage boy sits in an attic, flipping through a notebook. I keep dreaming about her, he says. He shows the camera a sketch, a woman with no eyes, only hollow sockets that drip like wet ash. Her name's Mira, he says. I paused the tape. That wasn't possible. She would have been my age. I rewound, played it again. His hands trembled, the camera shakes. She says if I don't write someone else, she'll come through the mirror again. He holds up a Polaroid of a mirror with a smeared name on it, Daniel. I did everything I could to track the boy down. Through the pawn shop owner, I found the attic. It belonged to a family named Nichols. The boy in the video was Cody, one of the names I dreamed. Cody vanished in 2003, presumed runaway. Last seen leaving his house after a fight with his parents about imaginary people in the glass. Police report said he carved names into the bathroom mirror before disappearing. Names that matched mine and Mira's. Names from decades after he vanished. Impossible. Unless time in Ashcroft loops, bleeds, writes ahead. The ledger wasn't just a story, it was a script, and we were already written. I started seeing it spread. In online forums, threads started appearing titled Ashcroft Syndrome, The Mirror Whisperer, and Who Else Sees Names. Most were deleted within minutes. But one stuck around long enough for me to message the author, a user named Deep Reflection 82. They replied quickly, I've seen her too, but she doesn't use mirrors anymore. She uses screens now. I asked who she meant. They sent back a photo. It was blurry, a distorted still from a FaceTime call. But behind the person in the image, in the corner of the screen, I saw the same eyeless figure from Cody's sketch, grinning. She said I'm next unless I write someone else, they added. Then silence, their account deleted. Angela was a librarian in Ashcroft in the early 90s. I tracked down her niece, who still lived in the area. She talked to books, the niece said. I thought she was crazy, but she believed something was hiding in the ink. Angela vanished in 1994. The only thing left in her office was a handwritten list of names, same format as the ledger. At the bottom, I didn't want to, but it won't stop until someone finishes the story. I'm beginning to believe this thing doesn't haunt people. It uses them as pens, as vessels, to keep the story going. If you stop writing, stop feeding it, it rewrites you out. I tried to warn Riley. She blocked my number, said I was spiraling again. I couldn't blame her. But 2 days later she texted at 2:14 a.m, there's someone in my mirror. Then another, he says he's you. And a final one, help me. I drove 6 hours straight. Her dorm was empty. Phone inside, lights flickering, bathroom mirror shattered. On the wall, the words written backward in red. It's your turn to write. I'm not the narrator. I thought I was documenting this, recording it, warning others. But I'm not telling the story. The story is telling me. It made me go back. It made me open the ledgers. It made me write, and now it's making me write this. I can feel the urge, my hands trembling, eyes burning as if something's behind them, watching. I thought I was escaping. I was just being written in. I never wanted to move back to Brighton. It wasn't just the overcast skies or the way the sea always seemed to whisper at night like it knew something you didn't. Brighton was filled with memories I tried to leave behind, the kind of childhood you unpack only in therapy or dreams that wake you up with your jaw clenched. But after Mum passed, the cottage was mine. A small, weather-worn structure squatting on the edge of the coastal cliffs. The roof bowed inward slightly, like a tired old man hunching his shoulders against the wind. It smelled of dust, damp wood, and something I couldn't place, something slightly sweet, like rotting apples. I told myself it would be temporary. Fix the place up, sell it off, go back to London where things made sense and walls didn't creak when no one moved. The first week was mostly cleaning. Clearing out old photo albums, newspapers from decades past, bottles of forgotten pills with labels yellowed by time. There were still stacks of Mum's poetry journals, half filled with entries I didn't dare read. I found myself watching the floor sometimes, when I walked into a room and it felt colder than it should, or when I'd hear the faintest creak from a part of the hallway no one was in. It was an old house. That's what I kept telling myself. That was before the scratching started. It began on the 5th night. I was in bed reading when I heard it, a soft, deliberate scrape from beneath the floorboards, just below my bedroom. It stopped as soon as I froze. I thought maybe it was the wind. This house groaned in the wind like a person with secrets. But then it came again, slower this time. Scratch, scratch. My bed sat near a vented air grate, one of those rusted metal fixtures that hadn't been replaced in 50 years. I knelt down and peered through it, shining my phone's flashlight into the dark void beneath. Just dust and cobwebs. But the sound was real. And it kept happening. Every night. By the 7th night, I couldn't sleep. "I'm telling you, it sounds like something's in the floor," I said to Heather over the phone. She'd been my best friend since university, the only person who knew what I was like when my thoughts started spiraling. "You mean like a mouse?" she asked. "Too slow for that. And too rhythmic. It's like someone's dragging their fingernails across the beams." "You're hearing ghosts," she laughed. "Move out before they start writing messages in the condensation." "I'm serious, Heather." There was a pause on the line. "You're not seeing anything, are you?" "No," I said too quickly. "Just hearing." I didn't mention the black mold patch in the corner of the living room that seemed to be growing faster than it should, or the smell of soil that sometimes drifted up through the vents like freshly turned dirt. A week later, I decided to inspect beneath the floorboards. It was irrational, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong with this house. The cold pockets of air, the strange tension in the rooms, like they were holding their breath. There was a crawl space beneath the house. I remembered it from childhood, though I'd never dared enter. It had a small, rusted door behind the pantry shelves, nailed shut for decades. I pried it open with a crowbar and coughed as a cloud of dust exploded into my face. Inside, darkness, dirt, a few old pipes running along the wall. I had to crawl on my stomach to move more than a few feet. The beam of my headlamp shook with each breath I took. I saw nothing for the first few meters, just spiders, insulation, and then a nest. Not of animals, but trash. Candy wrappers, torn clothes, food cans, and in the middle a small notebook with faded writing. I flipped through it, heart pounding. The entries were erratic. Scribbles. Notes like, "She walks heavy, must weigh at least 150. Sleeps by 11, up by 6. She cries sometimes. Why? Her scent is different than the last one. How long do I wait this time?" My blood went cold. This wasn't a child's game. Someone had been living under the house, watching, possibly still was. When I stumbled out of the crawl space, I immediately called the police. 2 officers arrived, skeptical but polite. I showed them the notebook, the makeshift bed. They searched the crawl space again, but found no one. "No signs anyone's been in here recently," one said. "But the trash could be decades old. These places gather weird things." They took the notebook and left me with an incident number. But that night, the scratching came back, this time louder, faster. It moved from one side of the room to the other. And when I looked down into the vent, something moved just out of the flashlight's reach. Something pale. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the farthest corner of the bedroom, blanket wrapped around me, kitchen knife in one hand and my phone flashlight in the other. Every few minutes I'd flick the light toward the vent. Nothing. But I could hear it. The slow dragging sound of something or someone moving beneath the floorboards. It wasn't just scratching anymore. Now it sounded like breathing. I went to the police again the next morning. Officer Hall, the younger of the 2 who'd visited before, met me with a tight-lipped expression. "You sure it's not just the wind, or maybe a trapped raccoon?" I saw movement. And the notebook. "We're still examining the journal, but so far no fingerprints, no recent residue. It could have been under there for decades." "And the trash? The candy wrappers? Someone's been living down there." He sighed, clearly exhausted. "I'll talk to the station again. Maybe we can get someone from pest control to sweep it. Just keep the crawl space sealed for now, okay?" I nodded, but I didn't seal it. Instead, I bought a motion sensor camera, a small one, with night vision. I wedged it just inside the vent under my bed, angled toward the crawl space. The app would send a notification if there was movement. I barely closed my eyes that night. At 3:12 a.m., the notification pinged. Motion detected. I froze. My hands trembled as I unlocked the app. The feed was grainy but clear enough. Something moved just at the edge of the frame. A hand, pale and impossibly thin, fingers dragging slowly along the wooden beams. Then a face, only part of it. Just a cheek and part of an eye. But it was looking up through the vent. At me. I screamed, threw my phone, backed into the wall. I called the police again. This time they brought 2 more officers and a K9 unit. They went in with flashlights, dogs barking, wood groaning under their boots. They came back up after 20 minutes. No one's there. But the camera, I have footage. They examined it. One of the older officers, Sergeant Malone, frowned. Could be an old recording. Someone messing with you. No, this was live. It pinged my phone. He looked at me for a long moment, then lowered his voice. Are you taking anything? Medication? I knew what he was asking. Was I unstable? I didn't answer. The next day, I boarded up the vent, nailed it shut. I even moved into the living room to sleep on the couch. But that night, around 3 a.m., there was a soft knock on the living room wall. Just a single, polite tap, then another and another. I froze. I pressed my ear to the wall. A breath, shallow and slow, echoed from inside the wall. Then I heard it, a voice, muffled, male. Don't move. The walls of the house weren't thick, and some of the crawl space extended into the lower part of the living room. I remembered that from the blueprint I found in my mother's filing cabinet. It was all connected. Someone could move from room to room, beneath the floor, behind the walls, if they knew the layout. I went to stay with Heather the next day. She didn't ask too many questions. Just gave me tea and a blanket and told me I could stay as long as I wanted. But I could see the worry in her eyes. You should burn that place to the ground, she said as we watched an old horror movie that night. I half smiled. It's not haunted. No, she said. It's worse. Haunted means the thing is dead. We went back 2 days later with a locksmith and a structural contractor. I was ready to tear the floorboards up if I had to, but the crawl space? Empty. Worse, the trash nest was gone. The notebook, the wrappers, all of it. As if someone knew we were coming and cleaned it out. But they left something behind. A Polaroid photo, face down on the dirt. I picked it up and turned it over with trembling hands. It was me, lying in bed, asleep, shot from an angle above the vent. There was handwriting on the back. You breathe loud, like the others. You smell like shampoo, like her. Will you be next? I moved out that night. Didn't look back. Sold the place for a fraction of what it was worth. Some investor bought it to turn it into a rental. I didn't care. But sometimes when I can't sleep, I open the app for the motion camera. It's still installed. It hasn't detected movement in months. Until last week. 312 aim. One ping. A hand. A cheek. An eye. Watching. Still waiting. The motel I stayed in after leaving the house was 30 minutes outside town. A stale-smelling place with dim bulbs and floral wallpaper peeling from decades of cigarette smoke and neglect. But I didn't care. I just needed 4 walls, no crawl space, and a lock that only I had the key to. I had barely slept in days. The fear didn't fade just because I left the house. It followed me like a shadow. Every creak of the walls, every draft under the door. My mind would snap toward it like a whip. It wasn't just what I saw, it was how it made me feel. That thing, that man, had lived beneath me. Maybe for weeks, maybe longer. Watching, waiting, crawling under the house like an insect. I kept wondering what would have happened if I hadn't seen the notebook. If I'd just kept living there like everything was normal. Would I have woken up to find him standing over me? Or never woken up at all? 2 days passed. On the 3rd morning, I got a call from Officer Hall. We got something. You might want to come in. At the station, Hall handed me a brown envelope marked evidence, priority. Inside were several photos. They were stills from my crawlspace camera taken in infrared. Grainy, green-tinted and distorted. In each frame, the figure was closer. One showed him just below the vent, arms resting under his chin, watching the slats. You could make out a jawline, thin lips, hollowed cheeks. His eyes looked blank. Not vacant, not malicious, just void of something, like emotion had been stripped away completely. He moved out before we searched, Hall said. Whoever he was, he's a ghost. Left no fingerprints, not even hair. It's like he knew how to vanish. I stared at the photos, heart crawling up my throat. I want to find out who he was, I said. Please. Hall nodded slowly. We're checking local missing persons reports, shelter logs, mental health facility escapes. Nothing yet. That night in the motel, I couldn't stop thinking about what he wrote in that notebook. She left the trapdoor open again. She breathes like mice. I used to be able to hear her heart. Who was she? And what trapdoor? I remembered my mom always complaining about the house being cold, especially in the winter months. She'd say it's the damn floors, there's always a draft. She'd shove towels under the doors and vents, but the cold always came back. Maybe that wasn't just poor insulation. Maybe someone was down there even then. I called my aunt the next morning. She'd lived in that house when she was a teenager. I hadn't spoken to her in years, long family history, but she answered on the second ring. "I need to ask you something," I said. "About the house." There was a pause. Then, "Yeah." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "You saw him too?" My breath froze. "You what?" "I only saw him once," she said. "I never told your mother. She would have moved us. I was afraid she'd think I was making it up." She explained, one night at 16, she snuck downstairs to grab something from the kitchen. As she passed the hallway vent, she saw a pair of eyes, grey, wide, unblinking, staring back through the slats. She screamed. Their father checked the crawl space and found nothing. After that, she blocked every vent in her room with tape and towels. "And that notebook?" I asked. "Was it yours?" There was silence. Then no. But there was one like it when we moved in the attic. Pages torn out, just one sentence left. "What did it say?" Her voice dropped. "He listens better in the dark." After the call with my aunt, I didn't sleep. I just sat on the edge of the motel bed, replaying her words. "He listens better in the dark." That sentence stuck to the inside of my skull like mold. It made me feel small, watched, studied, even now. The motel wasn't safe. Nowhere felt safe anymore. He wasn't just a squatter. He was something else. Someone with a purpose, a pattern, and a mind that recorded the sound of my heartbeat. And I needed answers. Real ones. I took a risk the next morning. I drove back to the house. The yard had been taped off. "Police line, do not cross," fluttered across the gate. But the case was cold now. Paul wasn't answering my calls, and the patrols had stopped. I parked down the road and slipped in through the back fence. The silence was crushing. Even the crows had stopped crying. Inside, the house smelled of wet plaster and mildew. My footsteps echoed off bare walls. The floorboards creaked beneath me like they recognized me, or remembered me. I knelt down in the hallway, the vent. This was where I'd first felt it, his breath, his silence. I reached into my bag and pulled out a screwdriver, 2 screws. That's all it took to remove the slatted cover and reveal the narrow metal shaft beneath. I stared into it, the darkness seeming to move slightly, as if the house was still breathing. I whispered, "You're not here anymore, but I am." The silence replied with nothing. Then I saw it, scratches. Inside the vent walls, not recent, deep, erratic. Long marks running horizontally like fingers or claws. Some were curved downward like someone had been dragged away. My stomach turned. I made my way to the attic next. The place my aunt had mentioned. I hadn't gone up there in years, but it had always unsettled me. The wooden ladder groaned with every step. Dust clouded the air. And there it was. A single cardboard box, half collapsed, labelled Christmas, Misk. Inside, tinsel, cracked ornaments, a mouldy stocking, and a notebook. Old, leather-bound, water-damaged. I opened it carefully. Most pages had dissolved into fuzz and stain, but one remained, handwritten, in ink, block letters. They become what you forget. The sound behind me was soft, like a whisper. I spun, heart punching against my ribs. The attic was empty, but the air had shifted. A slight cold breeze came from behind the insulation in the far wall, a panel slightly ajar, a hidden space. I approached, tugged the insulation back, revealing another vent, this one leading down, not out. The shaft was wide. Rusted metal rungs ran along the side like a ladder. I aimed my flashlight down it. The beam swallowed itself in blackness. Then it flickered. For a moment I thought I saw something far below, a pale movement, but it was gone too fast. Back at the motel, I wrote everything down. Details, dates, words from the notebooks, photos of the scratches. I called Hall again. Still no answer, so I called my aunt. I went up to the attic, I said. "There's something behind the wall." Silence. "You knew, didn't you?" She exhaled sharply. I wasn't sure it was real, but yes. I remember Grandpa sealing that panel when I was little, told us never to touch it. Said the house was old, dangerous, prone to settling, that's what he called it. Settling? Like it was a body shifting under its own skin. That night the knock came at my motel door, 3 slow taps. Not rushed, measured. I grabbed the bat I'd taken from the trunk and crept to the door. "Who's there?" I called. Nothing. I peeked through the peephole. Empty. I opened the door an inch just to check the hall, nothing. Until I looked down. A folded piece of paper sat on the welcome mat. I picked it up with trembling hands. Written on it in crude, jagged pencil, I missed the floorboards. I didn't sleep after the note. I sat in the motel chair all night, clutching the baseball bat like it was the only thing keeping me from drowning. The paper. I missed the floorboards, rested on the desk in front of me, almost pulsing in the silence. I kept the lights on. Nothing came. No more knocks, no more notes, just that heavy feeling pressing down on my chest. I drove back to the house at sunrise. This time I didn't park down the road. I pulled straight into the driveway like I owned the place again. Something about the note made me feel territorial, violated. As if this wasn't just about a house anymore. It was about me. Inside, the air was still, but the silence was expecting. I went straight to the attic. This time I brought tools. Crowbar, gloves, flashlight. I tore away the insulation, exposing the warped wooden panel covering the shaft in the wall. It was nailed shut with rusted, mismatched nails, as if someone had done it in a hurry or desperation. I pried them out one by one. The panel gave way with a sigh of dust and rot. Behind it was a crawl space, narrow but passable, lined with old beams and planks that seemed older than the house itself. The air was cold, colder than it should have been. I crawled in. The shaft descended at an angle, steeper than stairs but not quite vertical. My flashlight flickered, catching glimpses of strange carvings in the wood, spirals, lines, what looked like tally marks etched over and over. I kept going. 20 feet in, I found the first sign of habitation. A pile of tattered blankets, a spoon, a crusted bowl, and a child's shoe. Tiny, brown leather, mold spreading across the sole. My stomach clenched. I reached for the flashlight again, and that's when I heard it. A breath, behind me, not my own. I spun around, shining the beam back the way I came. Nothing. But the dust I'd disturbed, it was settling in a way that suggested someone else had crawled behind me. I scrambled back into the attic, heart pounding. I should have left right then. But I didn't. I was too deep. Back at the motel, I took out the notebook I'd recovered from the attic box. The phrase inside, "They become what you forget." I stared at it for an hour. Then I Googled something I'd avoided until now. Missing persons, Ashcroft County, last 40 years. Too many results, too many faces, but one stuck out. Caleb Eddins, disappeared in 1998, age 9. Last seen riding his bike near the corner of Willow and 2nd, 2 blocks from my house. He was never found. Another name, Shauna Myers. Age 26, vanished from a rental 2 streets over. Her apartment had strange floor complaints, creaking, movement at night. Her file mentioned she had become paranoid about noises under the floor. She was reported missing 3 weeks after contacting her landlord. I printed out the cases, spread them across the motel bed, drew circles, lines, pins if I had them, and a pattern started to form. Every missing person had a link to the block around my house. More than that, several had reported strange noises beneath their floors. One had even filed a noise complaint before vanishing. Another a voicemail. "He's down there. I can hear him breathing when I sleep. I think he waits for me to fall asleep before moving." It had never been investigated. I called Hall. This time he picked up. His voice was groggy. "Hello?" "Detective, it's me. I found something. A crawl space. Old, hidden." A pause. "You need to stop." I froze. "What? You're getting too close." "What the hell does that mean?" Hall exhaled. "Look, I'm not saying this officially, you understand, but that house, it has a history, and there are things we don't document because they don't make sense on paper." "Then tell me what you know off the record." Another long pause. "Then, have you ever heard of liminal feeders?" The term meant nothing to me. He continued, "It's a fringe theory, not official, not in any casework, but a few of us keep track of places, houses, where disappearances cluster without logic. And the theory is, something lives in between, in the spaces we forget, the floors, the walls, the basement sealed shut. You think something's living in my house? I think something learned how to live there, something human once, something that learned to feed on the inattention of others." I said nothing. He added, "They never find bodies. That's the thing." I hung up. Outside, night was falling, and in the back of my head, I swore I heard it again. That slow crawling sound under the motel floor, just beneath my feet. I didn't sleep that night either. Something was wrong with the motel room. I could hear the dull tap, tap, drag underneath the floor. At first I convinced myself it was just the pipes, maybe rodents, but the rhythm was too deliberate, too slow, too human. I stood in the center of the room with my ears tuned to the silence, feeling like prey. Whatever it was, it didn't just move, it waited. I felt it the way animals sense a predator watching from the dark, that unbearable pressure. So I left, drove home just after 4 a.m. The air was cold and humid. Fog hung over the street, curling around the tires of my car like fingers. As I stepped through the front door of the house, I noticed something I hadn't before. The living room rug was off-center, only slightly, but enough. And under it, the floorboards looked shifted. The grain patterns didn't line up properly. I pulled it aside, revealing a faint seam between the planks. A trapdoor? No, nothing mechanical, just boards that had been pried up before. Maybe often. I tapped on them, hollow. I went to the garage and came back with a crowbar and headlamp. Every cell in my body screamed not to do it. But I had to know. I couldn't keep living in the unknown. The first board gave way with a crack and a gust of cold, earthy air. I removed 4 more and peered into the dark. There was a narrow crawl space, far tighter than the one in the attic. But this one had something else. Steps. Wooden steps leading down. I swallowed and clicked on the headlamp. 1 foot after the other, I descended. The steps led to a narrow corridor beneath the foundation. The walls were dirt-packed and sweating moisture. The wood creaked with each step, as if groaning under my weight. But then I found the room. A hollowed-out chamber roughly 10 feet wide, lined with yellowed newspaper clippings and Polaroid photos, all hung with rusted nails, some overlapping. I moved closer. The clippings were reports of missing persons, all the ones I had printed and pinned on my motel wall. And the Polaroids? They were of them, sitting, standing, lying curled in corners of the floor like dolls, every photo dated, every one labelled in messy handwriting. Caleb, 5 days. Shauna, 3 weeks, unknown. Girl, 2 months. At the far wall, something was scribbled in black marker over the crumbling concrete. You forget. They become. They become. You forget. Forgetting is feeding. My blood ran cold. A scratching sound pulled my eyes to the side of the room. In the corner was a blanket. Beneath it, movement. I stepped closer, flashlight trembling. "Hello?" I said, barely above a whisper. The blanket shifted, then froze. I reached out and pulled it back. It was a mirror, old, cracked, its edges framed in warped wood. But it reflected nothing. Not the room, not me. It only showed a set of floorboards, gaping, breathing. Then, for a split second, a face appeared. Not mine. A face with lidless eyes and a gaping mouth that stretched too wide, too long. Pale skin, no hair, and it whispered, "You're leaving me behind again." I dropped the mirror. It didn't shatter, it just disappeared, as if the floor swallowed it. I scrambled back up the stairs and sealed the boards with every nail I had. The moment I did, the house exhaled like it was pleased. That night I had a dream. I was lying in my bed, facing the ceiling. My limbs wouldn't move. Something under the mattress began to rise. Slowly, inch by inch, the shape of a man. He leaned over my face, featureless and slick with sweat. He whispered, "You remember me now." I woke up in a cold sweat. My phone buzzed. A voicemail. I hadn't received one in weeks. I hit play. "They missed the floorboards. You forgot too long. Now it's your turn." Click. After that night, I didn't go back to work. Didn't return calls. Didn't eat much. I sat in the corner of the living room with my eyes on the rug, watching for even the slightest twitch of the floor beneath it. Waiting. Listening. But nothing came. Not at first. 3 days passed in this haze, windows covered, doors locked, TV off. I dug through records, photos, anything about the house. I needed to know who had lived here, why this place. That's when I remembered something my mother said years ago, before she died. This house doesn't belong to us. It remembers the ones before. I never understood what she meant. She died when I was 17. Sudden aneurysm. The autopsy was clean, but now it felt orchestrated. I searched the crawl space in the attic again, this time removing the insulation completely. Behind a loose panel in the rafters, I found a rusted metal box. Inside were black and white photos, bound with twine, and a journal. The name on the cover was Henrietta Croft, my great-grandmother. The entries started in 1931. Something beneath the nursery floor. Ezra won't believe me. He says I'm tired, but I hear it, I feel it. It's listening to the baby. The boy points at the floorboards now. Says there's a friend under there, a skinny man with black fingers. He doesn't cry when he's down there, just listens. I'm losing time, hours at a time. I wake with dirt under my nails. It won't stop unless we feed it. And now I've seen what happens when we don't. I read the journal cover to cover, heart pounding. Every generation that lived in this house had experienced the same thing. Shadows, missing people, forgotten children, vanishing time. And one phrase repeated again and again in their trembling handwriting, forgetting is feeding. My mother must have known. That's why she was always so distant. She didn't want to pass it on to me, but it didn't matter. The house had chosen. I turned to the final page. It was dated 1972. I can't bury another child. I've sealed the door in the floor, nailed it shut with salt and prayers. If you find this, don't open it. Don't let it remember you. Let it starve. But I had already opened it. I had already remembered. That night I heard it again. Tap, tap, drag. But now the floor beneath the couch began to bulge. It pulsed like breath. The boards flexed inward, then outward like a heartbeat beneath the house. I ran to the hardware store in a frenzy. Bought salt, nails, sage, anything I could think of. By the time I got home, the rug was soaked in a dark fluid. It smelled metallic, earthy. The trapdoor had opened again. This time I didn't need to pry it up. It had already invited me back in.